Dragon Ball Super, one of the most anticipated returns in anime history. But how did a series that started with so much promise stumble through several mediocre sagas, only to rise again as one of the most celebrated modern entries in the Dragon Ball franchise? Let's rewind to where it all began. In 2013, Dragon Ball made a triumphant return with Battle of Gods, after the disaster that was the 2009 live-action Dragon Ball Evolution, a movie we fans collectively agreed to erase from existence. Toriyama himself decided to take the reins and bring the series back to life, and this wasn't just another self-contained Dragon Ball Z movie. No, this was a genuine continuation of the story. Battle of Gods introduced us to Beerus, the god of destruction, and Whis, his enigmatic attendant. It also expanded the lore with the Super Saiyan God transformation, giving us a deeper look at Saiyan history and the hierarchy of power in the universe. Fans loved it, and the numbers didn't lie. Battle of Gods grossed around $50 million worldwide. I still remember trying to figure out how to watch it since I missed the chance to see it in theaters. When I finally did, I must have watched it on repeat for weeks. For me, it wasn't just a movie, it was the Dragon Ball movie, easily the best up to that point. Then came Resurrection F in 2015, and this time I made sure to watch it in theaters. Frieza was back, Goku and Vegeta were training with Whis, and the stakes were high. It was another massive success, grossing even more than Battle of Gods. Now, I'll admit this movie hasn't aged all that well, some of its charm has worn off. But at the time, it felt like a perfect follow-up. It showed the world that Dragon Ball was still a powerhouse and fans were packing theaters worldwide. This overwhelming response sent a clear message to Toei and Toriyama. The world was ready for Dragon Ball to return in a big way. And that's how we got Dragon Ball Super. For me, hearing that Dragon Ball was coming back as a full-fledged series felt like Christmas morning. I grew up on Dragon Ball Z Kai and GT. Spent hours online watching AMVs, hunting down clips, and even falling for fake transformations like Super Saiyan 5. So when the news dropped, I was beyond hyped. I counted down the days until the first episode aired, but with all that hype came something I didn't expect: disappointment. When Dragon Ball Super started, it decided to retread the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F movies as its first two arcs. Now, I get why they did this. It made the story accessible for anyone who hadn't seen the movies. But for those of us who had already watched them, it felt like we were being forced to rewatch a worse version of something we already knew. At first, I was patient. I told myself, okay, maybe they'll add something new to make it worthwhile. But then came episode 5. Oh man, if you know, you know. This was the first big fight in the series, Goku vs. Beerus, and it was rough. The animation was, let's just say it was not good. Characters went off-model so often they looked like completely different people. The fight lacked the fluidity and intensity we'd come to expect from Dragon Ball, and the internet wasted no time tearing it apart. Memes of this episode were everywhere, and not in a good way. Unfortunately, the animation struggles didn't stop there. While nothing quite reached the disaster level of episode 5, the quality throughout this arc was inconsistent at best. Combine that with the fact that the story was just a weaker retelling of the movie, and it was hard to stay invested. However, I didn't expect things to get worse, and yet, that's exactly what happened with the Resurrection F arc. Now, I'll be the first to admit that Resurrection F was never as strong as Battle of Gods. The story lacked depth, and it leaned heavily on nostalgia by bringing Frieza back. But at the time, it made up for its shortcomings with solid animation and some really well-done fight choreography. So when Dragon Ball Super had the chance to adapt this story, I thought, okay, this is their opportunity to flesh it out. Maybe add some depth to Frieza's return or give us more insight into Goku and Vegeta's training with Whis. But nope, not only did the story remain largely the same, but the animation took a nosedive to levels I didn't think were imaginable for a franchise as massive as Dragon Ball. This brings me to the elephant in the room, the animation problems in the early parts of the series. The issues weren't because of a lack of budget or low effort. Far from it. The real problem was time. Dragon Ball Super started airing just a few months after the release of the Resurrection F movie. That meant the animators had very little lead time to complete episodes before they aired. With the tight deadlines, the team was rushed, and it showed. At the time, I didn't know any of this. All I knew was that the show I loved so much was struggling, and it hurt to watch. Characters were off-model, fight scenes felt stiff, and the overall quality didn't come close to what I'd come to expect from Dragon Ball. For me, this arc ended up being one of the worst in the series. In fact, I skipped most of it when it first aired because I just couldn't bring myself to sit through it. And honestly, I don't think I was alone in feeling that way. But with the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F arcs finally out of the way, the series was now free to tell new stories. This was the moment where Dragon Ball Super could really shine, using the lore introduced in the movies to explore fresh ideas. Enter the Universe 6 Tournament Saga, a saga that brought me, and I imagine a lot of other fans, back to see what Dragon Ball Super was cooking up. The Universe 6 Tournament Saga kicked off with some intriguing new characters and lore. We got Champa, Beerus's equally destructive and hilarious brother, Kaba, a Saiyan from another universe, and Hit, a stoic assassin with time-skipping abilities. Plus, the idea of Saiyans from another universe was a fascinating concept. But despite all this potential, cracks in the series were starting to show. The pacing felt uneven, the stakes weren't as compelling as they could have been, and to be honest, much of the arc just felt boring. For me, it wasn't until Goku faced off against Hit that things finally picked up. That fight gave us the Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken transformation, a jaw-dropping moment that reminded me why I loved Dragon Ball in the first place. Still, this saga seems to be somewhat forgotten. It's rarely talked about in the fandom, and it's even skipped over entirely in games like Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero. It's as if this arc, despite its moments, just didn't leave a lasting impression. Then came the Future Trunks arc. Now, this one was better received, and for good reason. The darker tone, the return of Future Trunks, and the introduction of Goku Black and Zamasu brought a level of intensity that the series had been missing. It felt like Dragon Ball Super was finally stepping up, but even this arc wasn't without its flaws. The ending left a bad taste in a lot of fans' mouths. Zamasu's defeat was convoluted, and erasing an entire timeline? That felt like a lazy cop-out rather than a satisfying conclusion. And then there were the character inconsistencies. Goku seemed dumber than ever, reduced to a caricature of his former self. Future Trunks, one of the coolest characters in Dragon Ball Z, now had blue hair for some unexplained reason. Vegeta seemed to have forgotten his emotional growth from the Buu saga, and Gohan? Just 2 sagas ago, he was at his lowest point ever. It was frustrating to see these iconic characters feel like shells of who they used to be. By this point, many fans were asking themselves, is Dragon Ball Super even worth watching? The nostalgia that carried the series early on was starting to wear thin, and the inconsistencies were piling up. But then, something remarkable happened. The Tournament of Power arc was a turning point for Dragon Ball Super. Right from the start, you could feel the shift in energy. They introduced a brand new opening theme, and it was easily the most hyped one yet. The glossy look that had defined the characters up to this point was toned down, and the animation? Oh boy, the animation finally delivered. This saga was Dragon Ball Super at its most ambitious, a multiversal battle royale with stakes that felt genuinely high. Entire universes were on the line. The introduction of Ultra Instinct brought back the sense of awe and excitement that had been missing for so long. And I can't lie, this transformation pulled me back into the series for the 3rd time. I remember scouring YouTube for theories about Ultra Instinct, what it could be, how it worked, and who could possibly stop Goku in this state. It felt like the entire fandom was buzzing with excitement, and it wasn't just Goku who had moments. Vegeta, Gohan, Android 17, and even Frieza all had standout moments. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the entire cast was being used to their full potential. The fights were some of the best in the franchise, and the animation, which had been a sore spot earlier in the series, became a highlight. Episodes like Goku vs. Jiren set a new standard, not just for Dragon Ball Super, but for the entire Dragon Ball franchise. The sheer intensity, the choreography, and the emotional weight of those fights were unmatched. And let's talk about that ending. Dragon Ball Super absolutely nailed the conclusion to the Tournament of Power. In my opinion, it's one of the best endings in the entire Dragon Ball series. The final moments with Android 17's selfless wish and Goku and Frieza teaming up to take down Jiren felt like the perfect combination of everything the saga had built up to. Now, I'm not saying the Tournament of Power was flawless, it definitely had its issues. Some episodes just didn't hit, and the sheer number of characters early on made things feel a bit chaotic. But once the tournament whittled down to Universe 7 and Universe 11, the pacing tightened, and every episode felt like an event. It was so good that fans were hosting watch parties. Every week, it felt like the fandom was collectively holding its breath to see what would happen next. Each episode somehow managed to outdo the last, and by the end, Dragon Ball Super had reclaimed its place as a beloved part of the franchise. And just when it seemed like Dragon Ball Super couldn't get any better, the Broly movie dropped. This wasn't just a good Dragon Ball movie, it was a fantastic movie, period. I still remember trying to watch this movie at school on my phone. The animation was stunning, with characters given a fresh, dynamic look that elevated the entire experience. The fights were jaw-dropping, and Broly was reimagined as a character with depth and emotion. It was everything fans had wanted and more, cementing Dragon Ball Super's comeback in a way few could have predicted. But while the Broly movie was a high point, the anime itself ended after the Tournament of Power. Thankfully, the Dragon Ball Super manga kept the momentum alive with two major arcs, the Moro arc and the Granolah arc. The Moro arc was the first real test of how Dragon Ball Super could evolve without the anime running alongside it. Moro, the goat-like sorcerer who could drain entire planets of their energy, was a villain that felt genuinely fresh. I mean, at least for a while, until the Cell similarities started to kick in. But his powers felt unique, and the stakes were huge, with the entire universe in danger. Plus, this arc gave us some incredible moments. Goku finally mastering Ultra Instinct was a highlight, but what really stood out to me was Vegeta's growth. His trip to planet Yardrat to learn the Spirit Fission technique and his redemption to the Namekians both felt like a major step forward for his character. Then came the Granolah arc. This one had a lot of promise. A lone survivor seeking revenge against the Saiyans and Frieza for the destruction of his people. Granolah was a compelling character, and the introduction of the Heaters brought some fresh dynamic to the story. But the real highlight was the return of Bardock. His flashback not only added depth to the Saiyan race, but also gave Goku a more personal connection to his heritage. Vegeta's Ultra Ego transformation, his own version of a godly power-up, was also a standout moment that felt true to his character. And just when we thought things were settling down, Black Frieza entered the scene. Frieza returned with yet another transformation, and this time it was terrifying. Frieza completely wiped the floor with Ultra Instinct Goku and Ultra Ego Vegeta. It was a jaw-dropping moment that reminded us why Frieza is one of the greatest villains in the franchise. Both the Moro and Granolah arcs were well received for the most part, with some fans even calling the Moro arc the best saga in Dragon Ball Super. I mean, a few months ago, you couldn't say anything about Dragon Ball Daima without someone going, "We wanted the Moro and Granolah arc instead." Then there's Dragon Ball Super Superhero, the movie that shifted the spotlight to Gohan and Piccolo. Piccolo's new transformation, Orange Piccolo, felt like a much-needed upgrade for his character, and Gohan's new transformation finally put Gohan back on top. Fans of his surely had been waiting a long time for this. Say what you will about the transformation itself, whether you loved it or thought it was over the top, but there's no denying that this movie gave Gohan the spotlight he deserved. And it wasn't just a critical success, it was a box office hit, grossing about $86 million worldwide and becoming the highest grossing Dragon Ball movie to date. Speaking of Gohan and the superhero movie, the manga took things even further. After that arc, we got a scene that fans had been debating about for some time: Beast Gohan versus Goku. This fight was hype. Even as someone who wasn't reading the manga at the time, I tuned in just to see what would happen. So as we look back on Dragon Ball Super, it's clear that this series has been a roller coaster of highs and lows, from its shaky beginnings to its triumphant moments. But as we reflect on where the series is headed, it's impossible not to acknowledge the heartbreaking loss of Akira Toriyama. Toriyama wasn't just the creator of Dragon Ball, he was the heart and soul of the franchise. His storytelling, his humor, his ability to balance epic battles with heartfelt moments, all of it shaped not just Dragon Ball, but anime and pop culture as a whole. Losing him feels like losing a part of what made this series so special. But even in loss, there's hope. Toyotaro, Toriyama's hand-picked successor, has shown that he understands what makes Dragon Ball tick. While no one can ever truly replace Toriyama, Toyotaro will carry the torch with respect and passion, hopefully crafting new stories that honor the legacy while pushing the franchise into new territory. And who knows, with rumors swirling about Dragon Ball Super returning in 2025, it feels like we're on the verge of something big. If it happens, it'll be a bittersweet moment, a chance to celebrate everything Toriyama gave us while embracing how the franchise continues to evolve under Toyotaro's guidance. At its core, Dragon Ball has always been about resilience. It's about rising after you've been knocked down, finding strength in the face of adversity and pushing forward no matter what. As fans, we embody that spirit too. We'll keep looking ahead, eager for the next chapter, because Dragon Ball isn't just a series, it's a legacy, one that will endure, inspire, and forever remind us of the joy, the wonder, and the creativity that Toriyama shared with the world. Thank you, Toriyama.